Warships cut across warm tropical waters. Cargo lanes are crowded with tankers carrying oil, gas, and minerals toward the United States and Europe. And just beyond the horizon, two global powers maneuver for influence. One defending a hemisphere it has dominated for a century, and the other expanding its footprint into what Washington once considered untouchable. Today, the Caribbean is no longer a quiet maritime space. It is becoming a strategic front line between the United States and China, defined not by open conflict, but by ports, loans, intelligence stations, and the silent movement of naval assets. For years, this competition unfolded quietly. But recent deployments, new alliances, and escalating political shifts have pushed the region toward a colder, sharper confrontation. Here is the part most observers underestimate. The Caribbean is not a peripheral theater. Control of these waters shapes energy flows, trade to the U.S. homeland, and the balance of power across the entire Western Hemisphere. As of 2024 and 2025, the geopolitical temperature in the Caribbean is rising rapidly. Washington has increased naval patrols and surveillance flights around Cuba, Venezuela, and the Southern Caribbean. New Coast Guard cutters have been permanently stationed near Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, while defense cooperation with the Dominican Republic, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana has accelerated. At the same time, China has expanded political, financial, and logistical influence across the region. A major intelligence facility in Cuba has reportedly been upgraded with Chinese support. Beijing has invested in ports in Suriname, Trinidad, the Bahamas, and Panama, increased its presence in the Caribbean Development Bank, and deepened economic ties with Venezuela's state companies. These moves have triggered concern in Washington because they mirror a familiar pattern seen elsewhere. Ports followed by loans, political leverage, and eventual logistical access. The Caribbean sits just a few hundred miles from Florida, and for U.S. strategists, any foreign military footprint, however limited, immediately touches national security. What makes this moment especially delicate is that the Caribbean is also experiencing political fragmentation, economic pressure, and intense competition over energy corridors. These are precisely the conditions external powers can exploit. For most of the 20th century, the Caribbean functioned as a U.S. sphere of influence. Under the Monroe Doctrine, any external military presence was treated as unacceptable. American bases in Puerto Rico, Guantanamo Bay, and Key West dominated the region, while China had no meaningful role in the hemisphere. That balance began to shift in the early 2000s. China sought new markets, new allies, and new access points to the Atlantic. Small island nations, often economically fragile, became attractive partners for loans, port construction, and trade agreements. By the 2000s, Beijing had established diplomatic ties with nearly every country in the region, replacing Taiwan as the formal partner for many governments. As Venezuela's political and economic crisis deepened, China emerged as a major creditor and commercial partner, increasing its leverage. The United States responded with sanctions, renewed security partnerships, and fresh regional diplomacy. But the strategic gap had already opened. The Caribbean was no longer a geopolitical certainty. It had become a geopolitical contest. That contest is now entering a harder phase, where economics, maritime access, and military signaling intersect directly with the core security of the United States. For Washington, the Caribbean is not viewed as a distant region, but as an extension of its own strategic perimeter. The priority is protecting surrounding waters and trade routes, preventing foreign military footholds, safeguarding maritime corridors linking Florida, the Gulf, and the Atlantic, and limiting Chinese influence close to U.S. shores. China's interests are different, but no less strategic. Beijing seeks leverage near the U.S. homeland, secure sea routes for energy and commerce, expanded political alliances in Latin America, and access to ports that could offer future logistical flexibility. Even without formal military bases, influence over Caribbean ports provides a long-term advantage, economic today, potentially strategic tomorrow. Venezuela occupies a pivotal position in this competition. Its priorities include reducing dependence on U.S.-controlled financial systems, deepening ties with China for political and economic support, and maintaining control over oil exports that move through Caribbean routes. Cuba also plays a central role. Economic relief, external security guarantees, and a strategic counterweight to U.S. pressure drive Havana's cooperation with Beijing, particularly in telecommunications and intelligence, areas that sit at the core of U.S. concerns. For smaller Caribbean states, the calculus is different. Infrastructure financing, tourism recovery, climate resilience, and partner diversification dominate decision-making. Many of these governments use U.S.-China rivalry to negotiate better terms rather than choosing sides. Beneath these visible actors lies a deeper structural reality. The Caribbean's geography grants disproportionate power to whoever shapes its ports, straits, and maritime nodes. This is one of the most strategically sensitive maritime spaces in the world. Access to the U.S. mainland flows through the Gulf of Mexico, the Straits of Florida, and the Windward Passage, natural gateways to the eastern United States. Any rival leverage here affects maritime security, energy imports, and coastal defense. The region is also central to global energy and commercial flows. A significant share of crude oil, LNG, and refined petroleum bound for the United States and Europe transits Caribbean waters. Even non-military disruptions would send shockwaves through global markets. The Panama Canal adds another layer of importance. More than 14,000 vessels move between the Atlantic and Pacific each year, and China already operates several terminals near the canal. A stronger Chinese position in the Caribbean narrows the strategic distance between that commercial hub and Beijing's broader interests. These stakes explain why even modest political shifts on small islands can trigger disproportionate reactions from Washington or Beijing. Looking ahead, several trajectories are possible. One path is continuity, where tensions remain low level. China expands economic influence while avoiding overt military presence, and the United States reinforces surveillance and local partnerships. The rivalry stays largely diplomatic and commercial. Another path involves escalation. A new port agreement, intelligence installation, or military cooperation deal between China and a Caribbean nation could trigger a forceful U.S. response, including increased naval deployments, sanctions, or the renegotiation of alliances. There is also the possibility of de-escalation or a partial reset. Economic pressures may push Caribbean states to balance both powers without fully aligning with either, while Washington increases development support to counter Beijing's lone-driven influence. Finally, there is the wild-card scenario. A political crisis in a key state, such as Venezuela, Cuba, or Panama, could create a sudden vacuum, drawing external powers into more direct competition and sharply raising the geopolitical temperature. Great power competition rarely begins with dramatic events. It starts quietly, through ports, loans, supply chains, and the logic of geography. The Caribbean, long assumed to be stable and predictable, is becoming a space where the architecture of hemispheric power is being redrawn. What happens here will shape the future balance between the United States and China, not only in the Western Hemisphere, but across the global system. Because in geopolitics, proximity is power, and the waters closest to a great power often reveal its greatest vulnerabilities. Thank you for watching the Atlas Report. If you enjoyed this analysis, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss our next documentary. Your support helps us continue exploring global power, strategic geography, and the forces shaping world events. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you in the next report.